about your plans for this 3-day weekend. Okay, now you can bring it back up here, please. I'm sure during your discussions, the majority of you were not worried about keeping these conversations flowing. I'm sure the majority of you were not worried about your eye contact with the other person. And I'm sure the majority of you weren't squirming in your seats trying to get yourself to focus. For typically developing students, these communication skills are acquired and improved throughout the span of your life. However, this isn't always the case for children who have autism. Autism allows kids to have specific difficulties in communication skills, more specifically with direct eye contact and with repetitive behaviors. So what exactly is autism? Ocock and colleagues defined autism in a 2018 article titled Central Auditory Processing Disorders in Individuals with Autism Spectrum Disorder as a broad diagnosis of a variety of behavioral and cognitive differences between each individual. I want to emphasize the idea of variety, because every kid that's diagnosed with autism most certainly does not fit into one mold or one definition of what it is. And so I want you all to keep that in mind today as I speak about the different characteristics that define what autism is. Because what it really is, it's a broad range of severities. So there's high-functioning kids, and there's also low-functioning kids. In some cases, the term autistic savant may be used. Glaser defined it in a 2014 article titled Understanding Autism as an individual that expresses an extraordinary skill that no one else has. My mom used to teach special education for 8 years, and one of her kids that she taught was named Michael. And Michael ended up coming to the high school I went to, and I TA'd in a special education class as well there. And he was able to tell you every single highway across the United States, both directionally and in some cases where that freeway would take you. So these are the skills that are so unique to each individual that make it so fascinating to learn about. When we think about communication, it has to do with the idea of a sender and a receiver. So regardless of how we communicate, whether it be through sign language or whether it be through verbally communicating, typically developing students recognize and consider the backgrounds of the receiver in order to speak respectfully and in order to speak effectively. However, this isn't always the case for these children who have autism. Wilson explained in a 2018 article titled Autism Spectrum Disorder, Assessment of Social Behavior, that these individuals have a hard time examining their environment and circumstances around them. In a 2008 article labeled Signs and Symptoms of Autism Spectrum Disorder from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they noted that oftentimes these kids repeat phrases or give unrelated answers to questions. So going back to when I was a TA, every single day I would take these kids to lunch and sit with them for 20 minutes. And I would ask them, what are you guys eating for lunch today? Just to get conversation flowing. And there was this one kid named Daniel, and he would say, helicopter, 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 every single day to the exact same question. And so Daniel, he was processing the information that I had to tell him, but he wasn't taking that external stimuli in, and he wasn't responding to what I was saying, but he was just thinking about what he wanted to think about. And so this is really typical for these kids because their minds are just going at whatever pace they want to go at, and so they don't make these conversations flow as freely as we were doing earlier. One of the characteristics of a child with autism is an inability to make that direct eye contact. An experiment was published by the Journal of Abnormal Psychology in 2018. And what they were doing was they were examining the eye avoidance in these kids. And so they took 4 different expressions. There was an angry expression, a neutral expression, a happy expression, and a sad expression. And what they found was that these kids were looking at this angry expression for the least amount of time. And so they deduced that kids with autism perceive this direct eye contact as socially threatening. And so by gazing away at their attention somewhere else, it allows them to relieve that uncomfortability that they feel from looking at other people. Another characteristic children with autism have is the use of repetitive behaviors. Researchers haven't completely figured out why that is, But in a 2012 article titled New Views into the Science of Educating Children with Autism, Burns proposed that we have these long fiber tracts in our brain that process and integrate information across these vast territories in our brain. And the kids who have autism, these long fiber tracts are underdeveloped. And so instead of having these longer fiber tracts, they have short fiber tracts. And those fiber tracts are overused. And so that gives rise to repetitive behaviors like shaking your hands like this or rocking your body. And also going back to the idea of the autistic savant. And so it's those kids who are exceptionally proficient in one isolated skill. Another characteristic of these children are their inability to speak in some cases. According to a 2017 article found in the Journal of Developmental and Physical Disabilities by Cagliani and colleagues, 31% of children who have autism are unable to or have trouble speaking. And so in these cases, they often use something called PECS, or a Picture Exchange Communication System. So this is a very simplified model of what that would look like. Usually PECS is an app on your iPad where you have multiple different tabs to scroll through, or it could be found in a booklet. But basically what it is there's going to be different categories. So I laid my categories out by these different rows. So you're going to have sentence starters such as I want, I like, I need. And then this would be like something you would need, so a lunchbox, blocks, a book, and then a descriptor. So in this case, it's colors. And so what these kids can do is they can take off these different sentence starters and what they want, and they can give it to their speech pathologist or to whoever their TA is at the moment, and that's how they express their concerns to those people without actually being able to speak. So although I've described many different differences between children who have autism and typically developing students, I want to note that there aren't only differences between the two. In fact, I would like to argue that there's far more similarities between the two. Children with autism have dreams, aspirations, goals, fears, talents, just like typically developing students do as well. So if I can give you guys something to take away today, it would be to speak carefully and to speak with awareness of those around you, because you never know the abilities of that person that you're talking to.